On June 30th, 1867, three boys, William Graham, Thomas Graham, and their friend Alfred Berman, all set off from their homes at Table Hill in Daylesford, just behind me over here. They set off on a nearly 10-kilometre hike towards Wombat Creek, allegedly in search of wild goats. It isn't known if they found what they were looking for. They were never seen alive again. What followed their disappearance were weeks of fruitless and harrowing searches which shaped and altered the psyche of the people of Daylesford, the effects of which can still be seen in the town today. My name is Thomas Steropoulos. This is a very special episode of my documentary, The Price of Gold. What do I mean by very special episode? Now, what do I mean? Do I mean that this is episode 1? No. It's more like episode 0.5. It's a pilot of a pilot. So I've been working on this series for the past year and a half now. I came across the story of the lost children completely by accident. All of this is factually true. I saw in the news that someone went gold panning and they found a massive chunk of gold. And of course, in my mind, I thought, hey, I could probably do that. So I got some panning equipment and I set off in search of gold myself. And that eventually led me here to Daylesford. In fact, it led me specifically to just down there, a section called Twin Bridges. And one day while I was there, I needed to use the bathroom. There is a bathroom right here in this park that I'm sitting in. So I came up here and drove past that can, and I was curious. I didn't know what it was. So I went up to it and read the plaque, and it is a can commemorating the disappearance of these three boys. I looked into it some more. I went down the rabbit hole of researching and discovered this story, and discovered more stories similar to it. When people think of the gold rush, they think of tales of success. They think of people finding fortune and gold, but they don't remember the tragedies. And unfortunately, there was a lot of tragedy. And unfortunately to that, a lot of these tragedies were forgotten. Case in point, the lost children of Daylesford, it's mostly known by the people in town and largely unknown by people outside of Daylesford. So I thought that was really intriguing, really interesting. And so I started researching who knew about it and everything about it. I found people like Yvonne Fix, who is the custodian of where the boys were found, and Patrick Stokes, who is a associate professor of philosophy who did a mini-series for the ABC podcast History Lessons on the story of the lost children. I found Tash Joyce, who is a historian focusing on the disappearance of children in colonial Victoria. I came across all these other people, all these other historians, geologists, people who knew about this story, who could help me understand it. Now, Thomas, you might be thinking, what are you doing outside? Why are you filming yourself? Why are you on a hike? In the years after their disappearance, a semi-official hike was established, which follows the approximate route that the boys would have taken. Today, I am taking that hike in commemoration of the pilot episode being almost done. Well, I guess all that has to be done is to actually start. Let's go. Now, I should say, any information that I say might be incorrect because I'm doing this completely off script. Obviously. So if anything needs to be fact-checked after the fact, I will put that down here somewhere. Like over there, maybe. The microphone is directly below my mouth, so I apologize for any mouth noises while I struggle to breathe on this hike. It's quite a nice day for it though, all things considered. Some ducks over there. Now, I should go without saying that, obviously, Daylesford looks nothing like what it did back in 1867. So a lot of this landscape is completely different from what the boys would have seen, what it would have been like condition-wise for when they had left. So it's not exactly completely accurate to where they would have gone and how they would have gotten through things. I believe there's a bridge just up ahead here somewhere. Now that is a very steep hill. I don't know if that actually comes up on camera, but that was so steep. I tripped, if you saw. Something that doesn't get said very often is that there actually was a fourth boy. We don't know much about him at all. Really, the only thing that we know about him was that his surname was Griffiths. We don't know his age. We know that he was a neighbour to the William and Berman families, but apart from that, we know pretty much nothing else about him. He didn't testify at the inquest. He wasn't followed up on. He wasn't in any of the newspapers after the fact. He's just a ghost. He disappeared. So after Griffiths left the other three, the three boys wandered uphill, mind you, my God, this is steep. They wandered uphill down to the Daylesford Boland Road, where they were seen by a shopkeeper by the name of Mr. Much. Now it would have been roughly here where the William Tell mine was founded a few years after their disappearance. On top of that, though, there would have been a sort of hotel somewhere in this area as well. The Falls Hotel, I believe it was called. Now, just to be openly transparent, I'm not following the exact official path because all of my records show that the boys were said to go down what's currently Ridge Road. So they would have gone this way, not the walking trail. I believe that's just more sort of a scenic thing, you know, go out into the bush. This is all developed now, so that's obviously why they didn't make the trail go this way. God, I'm puffed. The thing that I really find amazing about this story is that these were children. The oldest was 6.5, the youngest was 4. I am puffed already. I can only imagine what they were feeling at this point. They're truly not that far from home at this point. They go much, much further out. There's just a huge gully down here. It's hills, quite high up actually. We're on top of Sailor's Hill. I believe at that point in history there would have been a settlement here, Sailor's Hill. I don't quite remember what the population was, but it was a few houses, a few people. There would have been people along this way. Potentially people could have seen the children walk past here. So there are only 2 instances where we know that the boys were recorded, where their voices were written down, and that is... Okay, bye. Dogs, man. And that is by Mr. Much, when they see him on the Daylesford Boland Road, and by Quinn, the boy who lived past Specimen Hill. Now, depending on what testimony you believe, Quinn might not have been the last person to have seen the boys. That might have been Quinn's neighbour, an ex-convict by the name of Benjamin Franklin, no relation to the other one. At the inquest, Quinn was asked about his involvement in the disappearance or his knowledge, and he mentioned Benjamin Franklin by name. Now, Franklin wasn't even involved in the inquest at this point. He was brought on. He had people call him out to the inquest at the Farmers Arms Hotel after Quinn had mentioned him by name. He was originally never going to be there. And he testified against Quinn. He said, "Whatever the Quinn boy said to you today is simply not true." What's really interesting about this is that Franklin's son, Cornelius Franklin, also was at the inquest. And he was recorded saying that he saw his father speak to the boys. He said that his father, Benjamin Franklin, called out. He said, little children, you're going the wrong way. Of course, Benjamin refuted this, but despite whose account you believe in, we truly don't know what actually happens that day, because there is just such an unreliable recount of this part of the story. June 30th, 1867, weather records show that the most severe frost ever recorded in Daylesford rolled in that night. It was freezing. William and Thomas were from a rich family. William Graham Sr., their father, was quite a wealthy man. He invested in a lot of industry of the goldfields at the time, so he was quite rich. They could have afforded decent clothes. But their friend Alfred Berman, he came from an ex-convict family. Benjamin Berman was a deserter. He was sent to Tasmania for desertion from the 44th Foot Regiment of the British Infantry. It's believed that he might have had lower quality clothes, hand-me-downs from his brother Albert, I think Albert, or I want to say Alfonso. That's probably incorrect. He did have a brother who was who died from a snake bite the year prior, who he was mistaken for in the paper. His name was misprinted as his brother. Now, alluvial mining was quite popular in the 1860s in Daylesford. It was the main way that people found gold. It was only in, I believe, the mid-70s up to 1888, I believe it was, where people would be doing deep lead mining. There's massive tower shafts going straight down into ancient rivers. And I don't recall the exact yield of these mines, but they were quite successful at their peak between the 70s and the 80s. It was only after the 80s, after 1888, I believe it was, where the yield went down. But I do believe that certain mines, like Specimen Hill, for instance, they were already in their decline by the time the story took place. But all these other mines, around 1888, the Graham family, William Graham Sr., they packed up and left after all this controversy, after this the disappearance, the searches. People uprooted their lives to help in the searches. The weeks after the discovery of the children, in September, people, certain people, not everyone, vilified them because they lost income, they lost work in the searches. The Graham family were rich enough to be able to uproot their lives. They moved to Creswick, just north from here. But the Bermans, ex-convict family, they weren't as rich, so they weren't able to do that. And they copped the entire flack for all of this. And cruelly enough, the Graham family, William Graham Sr., he actually was part of an expedition group that discovered a new series of mines up in Creswick called the Berry Mines? Berry something. Now, these mines were huge in their yield. And interestingly enough, one of these mines along this fault, along this reef, thank you, gold reef, was the New Australasian Mine number 2, the site of the most horrific mining disaster in Australian history. I have finally made it to the Daylesford Road. So the actual official walking trail, that would have taken me all the way through here, through this bush down there. And that's all well and good, but I wanted to be a bit more authentic. What was said was the actual way that the boys went, down Ridge Road. Now, what happened after the boys disappeared? That night, June 30th, the boys' fathers, William and Benjamin, they obviously realized that their children were missing. So they were searching the areas immediately around Table Hill, Sailors Hill, and the area where the mill market is today. They were searching all around that area. Of course, at that point, the boys were already in Wombat Creek. The fathers searched until about 1 a.m. that night. They had assistance from friends and family, police constables. But on June 1st, they made a report that the children were missing. And eventually, that report made its way to Mr. Much, who had seen the children the day prior. Now, he immediately went to the fathers and told them that he had seen the boys, and so the search radius increased to include that hole. The search radius increased to include the Daylesford Bolan Road, where I am right now. Now, in 1867, telegraph poles had just been put up along the Bolan-Daylesford Road. They would have looked pretty similar to what the power poles look like now. And when Mr. Much saw the children, and they asked which way was back to Daylesford, Mr. Much pointed to the telegraph poles and told them to just keep following the telegraph wires. And William, the oldest boy, who was 6, pointed to the telegraph wires and asked Mr. Much, the wires? Mr. Much responded yes, and they went off following the wires. So they would have travelled this way, towards Daylesford. But then, for some reason, they chose to come back the way that they had came, going down what's now known as Hogan's Lane, back on the trail. So the trail continues off that way. So I need to cross, well, it's not too busy, but I need to cross this road now. Oh God. Oh, that was so dangerous. Why did Benjamin Franklin refuse to say whether or not he saw the boys? Now, that's the really interesting thing, and we don't really have any way to know why, but people didn't want to be blamed at an inquest. They didn't want to be the person responsible. Obviously, being blamed at an inquest for the death or neglect of a child was bad, and obviously no one wanted to be blamed like that. But what happened to the people who were shunned? Well, there is an account of a young boy, Thomas Mulhall, I believe his name was, who was lost in the bush and found a man as he was walking down the road, and he said to him, "I need to go home," or something or the other. And the man was busy, he was working, I believe he was pulling a cart somewhere, and he didn't stop to help him. He just said, "Just keep going that way." The boy unfortunately died, and that man was found to be at blame. And there is a sense of vilification for people who do this, obviously, that if you don't assist a child in this situation, you aren't doing your duty in the community. You have failed as a member of that society. People from all walks of life got together to go search, to go help. People wanted to help, whether that was for philanthropic reasons or just from general empathy. There are a lot of reasons. In particular, business owners were, in particular, vilified if they didn't let their staff members take the day off to assist in searches. If they did let their staff have the day off to go assist in the searches, they were praised. It was all a popularity game sometimes. However, an interesting thing to note, if staff took the day off to assist in searches, I don't believe that they were paid. People lost business, they lost money in these searches because they couldn't work. Businesses were closed in Daylesford as well. In fact, I think roughly 40% of businesses shut to send their staff to go assist on the searches. A lot of people lost income, but of course some people did this for empathetic reasons. They wanted to help, but some people might have felt like they were forced to. On the night of July 1st, there was a meeting at the Jameson Hotel in Daylesford where the townsfolk gathered to discuss where they were going to be searching the following day. So they got together, they made plans, and they set off on July 2nd, 1867. And they searched the area up to the Wombat State Forest. Now, I don't remember if it was the second day or sometime in the first week, but there were footprints found. This was before a lot of townspeople started to assist in searches. They found footprints somewhere roughly around here, just around the edge of the Wombat State Forest. They found footprints. As the search grew in popularity, whether or not you believe if people were being philanthropic, wanting to help find the boys, or they just wanted to join in on the popularity of assisting in the search, these footprints were unfortunately destroyed. Now, what methods did the searchers use to help find the boys? Well, initially, they were just searching with manpower. I believe this was in the first few days. They got together in the Jameson Hotel and they divvied up search areas where each group would search. In the days following, they broke out into organized teams. I believe there were about 9 team captains who commanded a large group of men to search in a specific area. In the second week, I believe it was, they employed Aboriginal trackers. In particular, a man called Tommy Farmer, who was part of the Dja mob. The Dja are the native mob to the Daylesford area. Daylesford up until the border of Ballarat, where the mob there is Wathaurong. Now, the Dja were dispossessed. Up till this point in history, they had been violently dispossessed, murdered, moved to the Parker estate, Joseph Parker's estate, in Columbark, I believe is the name of it. I might get that wrong. Please correct me if that is the wrong name for that. But Columbark, if that is the name of the place, was up near Mount Franklin, north of this area, which was a land of the Dja people. The irony of using Aboriginal trackers, people who you have dispossessed, to assist you in finding your children, the irony is not lost here. It is the tragic, very tragic case of Australian history where we, as white people, have dispossessed the native people of this land and, in our times of need, request their help. I can only imagine the heartbreak of the people that, fruitlessly searching for 2 weeks and more, really takes a toll on you. And so remember that people weren't working at this time as well. People weren't earning an income, so they couldn't really continue searching for this long. In fact, it was pretty amazing that this brought the people of Daylesford together for so long. But unfortunately, they just couldn't sustain it any longer. On the 14th of September, the worst fears of the town were realised when, just outside of Musk, a small dog returned to its home with a child's boot in its mouth and, horrifically, remains of a foot inside that shoe. Another thing that is so amazing about this story in a really tragic way is that these three boys, they likely didn't have any supplies on them. They just set off from their homes playing. They likely didn't have any food with them. They likely didn't have any water with them. They just continued on their way down to the Wombat State Forest. They weren't really planning to go this far. At least we don't know if they were. We don't really know why they went this far. They just kept walking. It's unknown if they thought that they were going back towards Table Hill, or if they knew that they weren't going in the direction at all. It's so easy to get lost in the bush. In fact, if I didn't see that marker back there, I probably wouldn't be going this way. If this road wasn't here, I would be lost. When all the trees blend together, it's so hard to navigate, to pinpoint exactly where you are here in the bush. If you go off 10 meters and you don't pay attention, everything starts to look the same. So I can only imagine that to these children, perhaps they thought that they were going the right way. Perhaps they were intentionally going the wrong way. Perhaps there was something that they were running away from, either at home, a difficult home life, or maybe something scared them along the way. There are a lot of accounts of lost children being scared by dogs or wild animals and running off into the bush. Perhaps that's what happened, and they somehow found themselves at Specimen Hill Mine, or perhaps at that point when they were confronted by Quinn, who allegedly did grab William Graham, the oldest boy, to physically turn them around. Perhaps that frightened them and they ran off into the bush. Or perhaps if Benjamin Franklin did in fact see the boys, his arrival, him yelling at them, little children, you were going the wrong way, perhaps that frightened them. There are just a lot of things that can frighten you in the bush. So I've just turned a corner, going down this trail, and up ahead, what do I find? That steep-ass fucking hill. I don't know if it comes across on camera how steep it is, but it is vertical. Well, that's not good. Someone scratched off the markers. Huh. So it's just off that way to Specimen Hill Road. I'm going to take a little breather here and rest. Now, remember when I said how easy it would be for people to get lost here in the bush? I just did. I'm fine, I'm back on the track now. But, back over here. So, this marker, which had its marks scratched off, so I went down this way because I looked on Google Maps and I saw that if I went from this crossroad, followed this one out, so I came from that way. That's where the big hill was. I thought if I just continue going in the direction that I was going, I'll get to Specimen Hill Road. And while that is factually true, the actual trail follows off this way. Now, while I would have gotten to Specimen Hill Road, I would have gotten to the wrong section of Specimen Hill Road. I would have gone too far down, and I wouldn't have gone to the site where the Specimen Hill gold mine was, which is where the boys went. And that's the thing that I was just saying. It is so easy to get lost in the bush if you don't have any markers or sense of scale, direction, where you need to go. It's so easy for things just to start looking the same, for you to turn around and just lose where you are. It is so, so easy. And if there wasn't this road here, again, I wouldn't know where I would be going. I should just say, if you're ever going hiking, bushwalking, anything, always tell people where you are. Tell people where you are going. I told my family, I told them, hey, I'm going to Daylesford. I'm doing this hike. It's very easy to look up the trail that this hike takes you. I will say one more thing though. Of course, that is not something that the boys would have heard in 1867, sound of a chainsaw. It is likely, however, that they would have heard woodcutters. So not only was gold quite a big industry in Daylesford in 1867, but in particular, woodcutting was very, very big as well. When I was interviewing Yvonne for the documentary, she told me all about how woodcutting was actually a primary industry here in Daylesford. A lot of land was cleared outside of Daylesford for new settlements. Now I wanted to do the walk because for the past year that I've been working on this documentary, it is something that's come up consistently, that there is this memorial, this commemorative activity that people can do to honour these boys. Patrick Stokes, the philosopher who I interviewed, said that the best thing that we can do to honour the dead is to remember them in the life world. Patrick's primary point of study in philosophy, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Patrick. His whole philosophy is that the most genuine thing that you can do to honour the dead is to remember them. And that is evident here in this memorial hike. To follow in their footsteps, to remember who they were, what they did. These were young boys, they were young. They didn't leave behind much of a legacy, but this. This is what they left behind. Another thing about philosophy, a lot of philosophers posit that when groups of people come together, they form what is called a collective imaginary, an idea that these people are linked by shared ideas, shared morals, shared goals. And I think that is very indicative of this entire story of the people of Daylesford coming together to help search for these boys, to memorialise them in this way. And I think that is really the whole point of this entire story, that they were here, they lived, they died, but they are remembered. This entire trek took the children roughly about 8-9 hours. That is a massive, massive hill. I believe this is called Leonard's Hill up here. It's quite steep, and this has taken me about 2.5-3 hours at this point to get this way. I can only imagine, well, I can't, obviously, it's very obvious why it took the children this long to get to where they did, because they had to go up that. That's where I came from, all the way down there. And up ahead of me is Specimen Hill Road, right there. Whew. Now, if you believe everything that the inquest says, this is the spot where the boys were confirmed to be seen for the last time. Regardless who saw them, this is the last known, confirmed sighting of the boys, right down here. Now, what happened here? I explained it a little bit before, but I'll do it again because we're here now. So the boys would have come down from here, roughly, it's assumed. They would have come down from here, walking down towards Specimen Hill Gold Mine, which would have been roughly around here somewhere. There are still rails and tracks from the mine carts, which I can show you when we get closer to it, but they would have come up here. They would have been seen by Quinn, potentially Benjamin and Cornelius. They would have been scared off. They would have run off, whatever you believe happened, and then they disappeared into the bush, never to be seen alive again. The next time anyone would ever see the boys after this moment would be on the 15th, of September, when McKay, McNichols, Ninian and Brian brothers all went searching in the hills around McKay's hut, where they found the boys in the hollow of a tree. After the inquest, it's believed that the boys tragically died on that first night. They didn't make it any further than that. At the time, there was a newspaper recount of how the boys were found, and the description was quite macabre, quite disgustingly gruesome for what it was for the subject matter. It detailed the condition in which they were found, how they were found, how they were facing. I won't repeat it because it is, quite frankly, distasteful, disingenuous for me to repeat that out of respect for the dead. But I will say that William, the oldest, was found outside the tree. Seemingly he was keeping guard, perhaps, and the other two, Thomas and Alfred, were huddled inside the tree. The worst frost rolled in that night. It would have been freezing. So the boys were huddling to keep warm, with William, the oldest, keeping watch, protecting them, the youngest, from any harm that might come from him. I'd like to think that he did protect them. Now, I will state that I'm not doing the full trail. Now, everything that I've just walked is confirmed, or at least assumed confirmed, where the boys would have actually gone. These are based on the facts that there are people who saw them, and those are the ways that they could get to the people that saw them. So it's assumed that they went down Ridge Road because they were seen by Mr. Much, and the best way back then to get to the Bland Daylesford Road was to go down Ridge Road. Now, Specimen Hill Mine was somewhere along here. I believe it's just further up here. So this is roughly where they would have been seen by Quinn and potentially Benjamin Franklin and Cornelius. So that is why I'm walking this particular route. I'm not doing the full official trail, because everything past the point that I just was at is all guessed. It's quite a sad thought to think that if Quinn and Benjamin were successful in turning the boys around, this is the road they would have taken to go back to Daylesford. They would have gone down here. If they lived, if they survived, this is where they would have walked. It's quite tragic to think that they didn't listen to advice, to instruction, and they went the other way towards their death. If they had just walked this way, they would have made it back to Daylesford. They would have been taken back to Table Hill. They would have gone back home to their fathers, to their parents. And we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't have discovered this story because it would have never happened. You start to think of all the ifs when it comes to stories like this. Out of all the settler colonial nations of the world, Australia alone has this image of the bush lost child ingrained into the collective imaginary of Australia. Sure, it happens in America, it happened in England, but it is a pervasive notion in Australian literature of children being lost. You see it in The Duff Children, a very real story of children getting lost in the bush. You see it in, of course, most famously, Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is very pervasive in our understanding of ourselves. Frederick McCubbin, the famous Victorian painter, a lot of his works were about children getting lost in the bush. It was a very big theme, very big motif for his work. And it's a very haunting topic for such a beautiful place. There are kangaroos right there. Hold on. Right there. Hello. And we're getting close now to what was the Specimen Hill gold mine. It's just right over there. Now, every time I've come past here, there are signs on the fences saying, keep out private property, blah, 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 blah. It's very heavily fenced. I believe, if the signs are true, that there are a lot of security cameras. So the best that I can do is stand here on the fence line and just point in and talk about what you can see from the fence line. Look, here's a better view of the track. See? Goes up along here into there. Now, I can't really see on like Google Earth satellite where that actually goes to. The tree cover is way too dense for me to actually see past that point. But you can see that it goes in, curves right here. So the shaft must be somewhere around there. Now, an interesting question is, why weren't the children found sooner? The thing is, in 1867, a lot of people thought that it would be easy to find these children. I mean, they're just out in the bush. The thing is, people underestimated the bush. A lot of modern historians and academics consider the bush an enemy in this story. As you could see in the hike that I was just on, it was very steep. It was very muddy even. We had a massive storm last night. It wasn't as easy as just going out into your backyard and looking for the children. It was quite difficult. The terrain was unwelcoming. The searchers underestimated their abilities in making it through the bush. A lot of them were bewildered at the fact that three very young children found their way where they did and got as far as they did. I mean, the adults were struggling. I was even struggling. I mean, it was quite a hike. A lot of the landscape around Daylesford, it wasn't exactly old growth. A lot of that had been cut down because, as I said before, timber was quite a big industry of that time. A lot of the forests here that you see, these are all new growth trees. They haven't been around for very long, about 100 or so years at the most. There is actually quite little old growth left in this area, as I am to understand. I think the most of it is back behind me in the Wombat State Forest. But even that was logged. But the landscape at the time was scrubby bushland, so flat plains with occasional trees, shrubs, stumps. There were mine shafts everywhere. Tash Joyce, who I interviewed at the Pennyweight Flat Children's Cemetery, recounted to me how once the miners were done digging in their mine shafts, they wouldn't cover them up, they wouldn't mark them or anything. There are still instances of mine shafts which we don't know the location of, People do fall down mine shafts to this day. And that is one of the fears that the searchers had when they were searching for the children, that they were afraid that they had fallen down a mine shaft. That was a very real, very terrifying possibility at that time. And here we are, back to civilization. I am now walking past the Daylesford Primary School, and that is significant because in 1889, William Graham Sr. put forth a scholarship for the Daylesford Primary School called the Graham Dux Award. Now, this scholarship was awarded to one boy, one girl every year. So that is one piece of legacy that persists from this story. The fact that there is such a genuine and sincere and loving memorial like that, a difficult memorial, let me just say, it is truly touching that there is still this remembrance 158 years later. It is truly touching that that exists, and it is so immersive in a strange way to do what they did, to follow in their footsteps. Would I do it again in future? Yes. I think after I finish the documentary, after it's released, after there has been distribution, I genuinely do hope that it gets seen, because this isn't just my story, this is their story, this is everyone's story now. And I am really humbled to, in one way, be a part of that, I hope, to share this story. And that's obviously, that was never the goal, to include myself in this. I am more than happy to just be a storyteller, to share this story, because I think it needs to be shared. I think these boys need to be remembered, and on top of that, all of the other lost children. There were so many, so many. Not just the children were lost. There were many more lost along the way. And in losing these people, the people left behind to suffer the grief and anguish, but also to expand upon the production of gold and what that brought, the production of the timber industry and what that brought to the region. Those people are the ones who paid the price of gold.